The company Christmas party was supposed to be my wife's crowning moment. 3 months of planning, coordinating with caterers, selecting the perfect venue at the Grandview Hotel, and making sure every detail screamed success. Fina had worked herself into a frenzy over this event, convinced it would secure her the promotion she'd been chasing for 2 years. I should have seen it coming when she spent 40 minutes that morning deciding between the red dress and the black one, asking me which made her look more executive material. I told her both looked fine, which earned me the look, the one that said I clearly didn't understand the gravity of the situation. "Porter, this isn't just a party," she'd said, adjusting her earrings for the 10th time. "This is my career, our future. Derron specifically mentioned that tonight would be a good opportunity to see who really fits with the company culture." Derron Wilder. My boss, technically, though he spent most of his time in meetings 3 floors above my architectural drafting table. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and made decisions that affected hundreds of people without breaking a sweat. He'd built Wilder and Associates from nothing into one of the most prestigious firms on the East Coast, and everyone knew it, including his wife, Jovi, who stood near the bar looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I'd met her a few times at company events, striking woman with sharp eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. Tonight she wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and she was watching the crowd with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this show too many times. The party games started after dinner, team-building exercises disguised as entertainment, the kind of corporate nonsense that made everyone pretend to have fun while secretly calculating how it might affect their performance reviews. Fina had volunteered us for everything, of course. The trivia contest, the charades, the ridiculous relay race that had accounting executives crawling under tables. Then came the final game, holiday kisses. The rules were simple enough. Couples drew cards with point values, and whoever earned the most points won a weekend getaway to some resort in Vermont. The catch was that you could choose to kiss anyone in the room for bonus points, as long as both parties agreed. Fina's eyes lit up when the host explained the rules. I saw her glance toward the head table where Derron sat with the other executives. The calculation was written all over her face. "It's just a game, honey," she said, squeezing my arm. "We need those points if we want to win." I nodded, playing along. "Whatever you think is best." The first few rounds were harmless enough. Pecks on cheeks, awkward hugs, the kind of forced intimacy that makes everyone uncomfortable, but laugh anyway. Fina was keeping score on her phone, tracking every point like a day trader watching the market. Then she drew the golden card. 50 points for a passionate kiss with someone who isn't your partner. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her as she stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked directly to Derron's table. He looked surprised for exactly half a second before that practiced smile spread across his face. "Just for points," Fina announced into the microphone someone handed her. "Hope you don't mind, Jovi." Jovi raised her wine glass in a mock toast. "Go for it, honey. It's just a game." What happened next wasn't just a kiss. It was a performance. Fina wrapped her arms around Derron's neck, pulled him close, and kissed him like they were the only 2 people in the room. The crowd cheered, phones came out to record the moment, and Derron's hands settled on her waist like they belonged there. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like an hour while I sat there, watching my wife of 8 years kiss my boss with more passion than she'd shown me in months. When they finally broke apart, Fina was breathless and laughing, basking in the applause like she'd just won an Oscar. "That's how you play to win," she shouted into the mic, and the crowd went wild. I didn't react, didn't stand up, didn't storm out, didn't make a scene. I just sat there, watching. Watching who was recording it on their phones. Watching who was applauding the loudest. Watching who quietly looked away, uncomfortable with what they'd just witnessed. And I watched Jovi Wilder, who wasn't applauding at all. She was watching me. I stood up calmly, straightened my tie, and walked toward the bar. The crowd was still buzzing about Fina's bold move, already declaring her and Derron the winners of the game. Nobody noticed me leaving my seat. Nobody except Jovi. She appeared beside me at the bar just as I ordered a whiskey. "That was quite a show," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "My wife likes to win," I replied, keeping my tone equally flat. "So I noticed." She ordered a martini, extra dry. "She's very committed." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. The video was already uploaded to the company's shared event folder, tagged with tonight's date and labeled Holiday Party Games, Winner Announcement. Derron's handwritten approval for the event rules was attached, along with his signature on the liability waiver. "Company policy is pretty clear about relationships affecting workplace dynamics," I said quietly, "especially when they involve incentives or preferential treatment." Jovi's eyebrows rose slightly. That's an interesting interpretation of what just happened. Is it? I took a sip of whiskey. I'm thinking of stepping outside for some air. This crowd is getting a little too enthusiastic for my taste. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I could use some air myself. We left together, walking past the cheering crowd where Fina was still basking in her victory. She was too busy accepting congratulations to notice us go. Derron was back at his table, loosening his tie and grinning like a man who'd just gotten away with something. The hotel's side corridor was quieter, away from the main party, but still within view of the security cameras. Perfect for what I needed to show Jovi. I pulled out a manila envelope I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket. Your husband is very thorough with his expense reports, I said, handing her the first document. Team morale events, he calls them. Interesting how many of those happened when spouses weren't invited. Jovi's expression didn't change as she scanned the hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and conference bookings. All legitimate business expenses, except for the pattern they revealed. Derron and Fina attending the same events, staying at the same hotels, charging meals for two to the company account. This one's my favorite, I said, showing her a text message screenshot. Fina's words, sent to her friend Vera 3 weeks ago. D says the promotion is mine if I keep showing team spirit. God, these men are so easy to manage. Porter has no idea how far I'm willing to go to win. Jovi's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Where did you get this? Fina likes to back up her phone to our shared cloud account. She forgot to change the password after our last argument. I handed her my phone. Feel free to record whatever you think might be useful. I'm sure your lawyer would find it interesting. She didn't hesitate. Jovi took photos of every document, every receipt, every message. Her hands were steady, but I could see the anger building behind her eyes. 23 years of marriage, she'd told me once. 23 years of playing the perfect corporate wife while Derron built his empire. There's more, I said, showing her the final piece. A booking confirmation for next weekend, a luxury resort in the mountains. 2 rooms, but they were adjoining suites. Charged to the company as a strategic planning retreat. Just the 2 of them? She asked. According to the guest list, yes. Funny thing about strategic planning, it usually involves more than 2 people. We stood there in the hallway for a few minutes, the sound of the party drifting through the walls. Fina's laugh was distinctive even from a distance, bright and triumphant. She was probably already planning how to leverage tonight's performance into that promotion. What are you going to do with this? Jovi asked, handing back my phone. Nothing dramatic, I said. Just making sure the right people have the right information. Company policy exists for a reason. She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all night. You know, Porter, I think I've been underestimating you. Most people do. We walked back toward the party together, but neither of us rejoined the celebration. Instead, I watched from the doorway as Fina accepted her prize, that weekend getaway she'd worked so hard to win. She was glowing with victory, surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations and asking for details about her bold strategy. Derron caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass in what looked like a friendly toast. His smile was confident, maybe even a little smug. He thought he'd won something tonight, too. I raised my glass back and smiled. Let him think whatever he wanted. By Monday morning, HR would have copies of everything I'd shown Jovi. The company's board of directors would have questions about those expense reports, and the shared event folder would have a permanent record of tonight's team-building exercise. Fina finally noticed me standing by the door. She waved me over, practically bouncing with excitement. Porter, can you believe we won? This is going to be such an amazing weekend. Congratulations, I said, kissing her cheek. You really went all out for this one. I told you this party was important. Derron was so impressed with my initiative. He said it shows exactly the kind of leadership quality they're looking for in the new position. I'm sure it does. She was too excited to notice the edge in my voice, too busy planning her victory lap to see the storm gathering around her. That was fine. Let her enjoy this moment. Let her think she'd outsmarted everyone in the room. The party wound down around midnight. Fina spent the entire drive home talking about her strategy, analyzing every moment of her performance like a coach reviewing game tape. She'd calculated the risk, she said, weighed the potential benefits against the possible consequences. Made a bold move that showed she wasn't afraid to take chances. You're not upset, are you? She asked as we pulled into our driveway. I mean, it was just a game. Everyone understood that. Of course not, I said. You played to win. That's what matters, right? She beamed at me, leaning over to kiss my cheek. Exactly. Sometimes you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. That's how the world works. You're absolutely right. I helped her out of the car, walked her to the door, and watched as she practically floated into the house. She was already planning her outfit for Monday morning, talking about how she'd follow up on tonight's success. Strike while the iron was hot, she said. Capitalize on the momentum. I nodded and made appropriate responses while she talked. But my mind was elsewhere, thinking about the emails I'd be sending first thing Monday morning, the copies of documents that were already safely stored in multiple locations, the security camera footage that captured every moment of tonight's performance. Fina had been right about one thing. Sometimes you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. She just hadn't realized that lesson worked both ways. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from her big night. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathing. In a few hours, she'd wake up still riding high on her victory. She'd probably spend the weekend planning how to leverage tonight's performance into that promotion she wanted so badly. Let her plan. Let her dream. Let her think she'd won. Because come Monday morning, the real game would begin. Monday arrived with the kind of gray December sky that made everything look washed out and tired. I was at my drafting table by 7:30, earlier than usual, but I wanted to be settled in before the storm hit. The architecture department occupied the third floor of the Wilder and Associates building, an open-plan space with floor-to-ceiling windows that normally flooded the area with natural light. Today, the clouds kept everything dim and subdued, perfect mood for what was coming. Fina had left the house in full celebration mode, wearing her lucky red suit and the pearl necklace her mother had given her for special occasions. She'd spent an extra 20 minutes on her makeup, humming while she got ready. The weekend getaway certificate was already framed and sitting on her dresser like a trophy. I'm thinking I'll stop by Derron's office around 10, she'd said over coffee. Strike while the iron's hot, you know? Show him I'm ready to take on more responsibility. Sounds like a plan, I'd replied, not looking up from my newspaper. She'd kissed my forehead before leaving, a quick peck that felt more like marking territory than affection. Wish me luck. You won't need it. That was 3 hours ago. Now I was watching the elevator numbers tick up on the display board, waiting for the right moment to make my move. The morning routine was predictable in a building like this. Executives arrived between 8 and 9, middle management trickled in by 9:30, and the worker bees were expected to be at their desks before 8. Derron's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, always brought him his first coffee at 9:15. That gave me exactly the window I needed. At 9:10, I walked to the elevator with a manila envelope under my arm. Just another architect heading to a meeting, nothing unusual about that. The ride to the executive floor took 30 seconds. 30 seconds to review my strategy one more time. The executive floor was all polished marble and expensive artwork, the kind of space designed to impress clients and intimidate employees. Derron's office occupied the corner, with windows facing both the river and the city center. His door was open, and I could see him at his desk, scrolling through emails with the satisfied expression of a man who thought he controlled his world. Morning, Mr. Wilder, I said, knocking on the doorframe. Do you have a minute? He looked up, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. But his corporate smile was back in place before he spoke. Porter, of course. Come in. Great party Friday night, wasn't it? Your wife really knows how to make an impression. She certainly does. I stepped into his office and closed the door behind me. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. His smile widened. I hope you're not upset about that little game. It was all in good fun, you understand? Team-building exercises, nothing more. Oh, I'm not upset at all. In fact, I think it was very revealing. I placed the envelope on his desk and sat down in one of his leather guest chairs. Derron eyed the envelope like it might contain a snake, but his expression remained carefully neutral. What's this about, Porter? Company policy, specifically Section 4.7 of the Employee Handbook, which covers relationships that might affect workplace dynamics. I thought you might want to review it before your 9:30 meeting with HR. The color drained from his face. My what? Didn't Patricia tell you? Ms. Rollins from HR scheduled a meeting for this morning. Something about reviewing recent events and ensuring compliance with corporate guidelines. I checked my watch. Should be starting in about 15 minutes. Derron opened the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. His eyes scanned the contents. Copies of expense reports, hotel bookings, restaurant receipts, and message screenshots. All the evidence I'd shown Jovi Friday night, plus a few additional items I'd discovered over the weekend. Where did you get these? His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. Various sources. Amazing what people leave lying around when they think nobody's paying attention. I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. That text message from Fina is particularly interesting, don't you think? The one about showing team spirit to secure her promotion? He was reading faster now, flipping through the pages with growing alarm. This is taken out of context. These are legitimate business expenses. I'm sure they are, just like Friday night was a legitimate team-building exercise. I stood up and straightened my tie. Anyway, I thought you should see these before HR does. Professional courtesy. Porter, wait. He was on his feet now, coming around the desk. Let's talk about this rationally. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding at all. Everything's perfectly clear. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Derron? You might want to check the company event folder from Friday night. Some really great footage of the party games. Very educational. I left him standing there, staring at the papers scattered across his desk. The elevator ride back to my floor gave me time to savor the moment. By now, Patricia would be wondering why her boss looked like he'd seen a ghost. By 10 o'clock, he'd be sitting across from Ms. Rollins, trying to explain why his expense reports read like a romance novel. Back at my drafting table, I settled in to work on the Morrison project, a residential complex that had been giving me trouble for weeks. Funny how much clearer my thinking was this morning. Lines that had seemed impossible to balance suddenly made perfect sense. Angles that had frustrated me for days resolved themselves with elegant simplicity. I was deep in the flow of design when Eli Brennan appeared at my desk. Eli was the junior architect who'd been hired 6 months ago, fresh out of graduate school and eager to make his mark. Tall, thin, with the kind of nervous energy that made him bounce on his toes when he talked. He'd been angling for more responsibility lately, and rumor had it he'd been having lunch with some of the executives. "Hey, Porter," he said, perching on the edge of my desk. "Heard there was some excitement upstairs this morning." "Oh?" I didn't look up from my drawings. "What kind of excitement?" "Something about HR calling emergency meetings." Derron looked pretty rattled when I saw him in the hallway. Eli was fishing, trying to sound casual while pumping me for information. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "Nope. I've been here working on the Morrison project all morning." I finally looked up at him. "Why? Is there something I should know about?" His smile was a little too bright, a little too practiced. "Just curious. You know how rumors spread in a place like this? People are saying there might be some personnel changes coming." "Personnel changes?" "Restructuring. New opportunities for people ready to rise to the occasion." He adjusted his tie, a gesture that made me uneasily think of Derron. "I've been considering whether it's time to bring some new faces into the senior roles." I set down my pencil and gave him my full attention. "That's interesting, Eli. What makes you think there are going to be openings?" "Just a feeling. Sometimes when people get too comfortable, they make mistakes. Poor judgment calls. That creates opportunities for others." "And you think you're ready for those opportunities?" "I think I understand what the company needs. Loyalty, discretion, people who put the firm's interests first." His eyes were bright with ambition and something else, something that looked like knowledge he thought gave him an advantage. "Well," I said, picking up my pencil again, "I guess we'll see what happens." He lingered for another minute, clearly hoping I'd reveal more, but I went back to my drawings. Eventually he drifted away, probably to report back to whoever was pulling his strings. I had a pretty good idea who that might be. At 11:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Fina. "Can't reach Derron this morning. His assistant says he's in meetings all day. We'll try again tomorrow." I typed back, "I'm sure he's just busy. These things take time." Her response came immediately. "I know, but I don't want to lose momentum. Friday night was perfect. I could see how impressed he was." "Patience," I replied. "Good things come to those who wait." The irony wasn't lost on me. Fina was sitting in her cubicle 3 floors down, probably refreshing her email every 5 minutes, waiting for Derron to call her up for that promotion conversation. She had no idea that Derron was currently explaining to HR why his expense reports looked like a dating service invoice. Lunchtime brought more entertainment. I was in the break room when Patricia walked in, looking harried and tired. She'd been Derron's assistant for 8 years, long enough to know where all the bodies were buried. Smart woman, professional, the kind of person who kept her mouth shut and her eyes open. "Rough morning?" I asked, making conversation while I heated up my sandwich. She glanced around to make sure we were alone, then sighed. "You could say that. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't go into teaching like my mother wanted." "Corporate life not what you expected?" "Corporate life is fine. It's the people that make it complicated." She poured herself coffee with hands that shook slightly. 37 years old, and I'm still cleaning up messes made by men who should know better. "Anything I can help with?" She looked at me sharply, as if trying to decide whether I was fishing for information or genuinely offering assistance. After a moment, she shook her head. Thanks, but this is way above your pay grade. And mine, probably. She headed for the door, then paused. Porter, be careful who you trust around here. Things are about to get very complicated. After she left, I sat alone in the break room, thinking about her warning. Patricia had always struck me as someone who saw everything but said nothing. If she was concerned enough to speak up, even indirectly, then the situation was more volatile than I'd anticipated. Good. Volatile was exactly what I needed. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to my desk. Word was spreading through the building that something big was happening, though nobody seemed to know exactly what. Rumors flew through the office like sparks from a fire. Budget cuts, reorganization, possible layoffs, a merger with a competitor. I kept my head down and focused on my work, but I was listening to everything. The speculation, the gossip, the nervous energy that rippled through conversations. People were starting to choose sides, even though they didn't know what the battle was about yet. At 3 o'clock, Derron Wilder appeared at the elevator. She was dressed for business in a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look like she was heading into war. She walked through the architecture department like she owned it, which technically she did. 23 years of marriage to Derron had made her a significant shareholder in the company. She stopped at my desk and smiled. Mr. Keller, do you have a moment? I'd like to discuss some modifications to the design for our summer house. It was a plausible excuse for a conversation, and several people overheard it. I followed her to one of the small conference rooms, closing the door behind us. How are you holding up? She asked once we were alone. Fine. You? Better than I've been in years. Her smile was sharp and satisfied. Derron's been in damage control mode all day. 3 different meetings with HR, 2 with the legal department, and 1 very uncomfortable phone call with the board of directors. Sounds stressful. For him, yes. For me, it's been quite enlightening. She sat down and crossed her legs, completely at ease. I've learned so much about my husband's business practices. Did you know he's been using company funds to pay for personal entertainment for over 2 years? I had my suspicions. The board is very concerned about liability issues. Apparently, using corporate resources to facilitate personal relationships opens the company up to all sorts of legal problems. Harassment claims, discrimination lawsuits, breach of fiduciary duty. She examined her manicured nails. Very expensive problems. What's the next step? Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Derron's been asked to prepare a full explanation of his actions, along with a plan for addressing any policy violations. Her smile turned predatory. Should be fascinating. I nodded, processing the implications. And Fina? What about her? She's still expecting that promotion, still thinks Friday night was a career-making move. Jovi's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw something that might have been sympathy. Porter, you know this isn't going to end well for her, right? Even if she was just a pawn in Derron's game, she's still going to face consequences. I know. Are you prepared for that? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I thought about Fina that morning, humming while she got ready for work. The excitement in her voice when she talked about leveraging Friday night into a promotion, the way she'd kissed my forehead like she was blessing a faithful servant. She made her choice, I said finally. Now she gets to live with it. Jovi studied me for a long moment. You're not what I expected, Porter Keller. What did you expect? A victim. Someone who'd curl up and accept being humiliated. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. Instead, I find someone who's been planning this for longer than anyone realizes. She was right, of course. This hadn't started Friday night. It had started months ago, when I first noticed the pattern in Derron's expense reports. When I saw the way Fina's eyes lit up whenever she talked about team building with the executives. When I realized that my wife was playing a game I wasn't even invited to join. Thank you for the information, I said, about the summer house project. Of course. I'll be in touch if I need any additional consultation. After she left, I returned to my desk and tried to focus on work, but concentration was difficult. The building felt different now, charged with tension and uncertainty. People were walking faster, talking quieter, glancing over their shoulders like they expected bad news to come looking for them. At 5 o'clock, I packed up my things and headed for the elevator. The ride down felt longer than usual, giving me time to think about what Fina's mood would be when I got home. She'd probably spent the day getting increasingly frustrated by Derron's unavailability, By now, she might be starting to suspect that something was wrong. The parking garage was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to people working late. I was walking toward my sedan when I heard footsteps behind me, moving faster than normal. I turned to see Eli Brennan jogging to catch up. "Porter, wait up," he called. "I wanted to talk to you about something." I stopped and waited for him to reach me. He was slightly out of breath, and his usually perfect hair was mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. "What's on your mind, Eli?" "I think we should talk. About opportunities. About the future of the department." He glanced around the empty garage. "Maybe somewhere more private?" "This looks pretty private to me." He shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Look, I know something's happening. The meetings, the rumors, the way people are acting. Change is coming, and I think we should position ourselves to benefit from it." "What kind of change?" "Leadership changes. New faces in senior roles. People who truly understand what the company needs." His eyes shone with ambition and a hint of urgency. "I've been speaking with a few people, and there could be openings for the right candidates." "What people?" "People who matter. People who make decisions." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Fina thinks very highly of you, Porter. She says you're wasted in your current position. With the right backing, you could move up significantly." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You've been talking to my wife?" "We've had a few conversations. About the future, about possibilities. She's very ambitious, very focused on success. I respect that." His smile was meant to be reassuring, but it looked more like a threat. "She mentioned that you might be interested in exploring new opportunities." "When did these conversations take place?" "Over the past few weeks. Lunch meetings, mostly. She wanted to understand the political landscape better, figure out who the real players are." He was talking faster now, eager to explain. I was happy to help. She's obviously going places in this company. The pieces were falling into place. Fina hadn't just been positioning herself with Derron. She'd been working multiple angles, building relationships with junior executives who might be useful later, hedging her bets. "That's very thoughtful of her," I said carefully. "And you think there might be opportunities for me?" "Absolutely, especially if certain current leadership positions become available." He winked, like we were sharing a private joke. "Change creates opportunity, right?" "Right." I unlocked my car and opened the door. "I'll think about what you said, Eli. Thanks for the heads up." "Great, I'll be in touch. And Porter, this should probably stay between us for now, until things become more official." Doug? I nodded and got into my car, watching in the rearview mirror as he walked away. He was practically bouncing with excitement, probably already planning how he'd spend his first executive paycheck. The drive home gave me time to process this new information. Fina hadn't just been playing one game, she'd been running multiple strategies simultaneously, seducing Derron for the immediate promotion while cultivating relationships with up-and-coming executives like Eli for long-term security, covering all her bases. Smart, ruthless, exactly the kind of thinking that had made her successful in her previous jobs. It was also exactly the kind of thinking that was about to destroy her. Tuesday morning brought the first real snow of the season, fat flakes that turned the city into something soft and deceptive. I watched from our kitchen window as Fina scraped ice off her windshield, her movements sharp and frustrated. She'd spent most of Monday evening trying to reach Derron, leaving increasingly urgent voicemails that went unreturned. "Something's wrong," she'd said over dinner, picking at her salad without really eating. "He's avoiding me. Patricia keeps saying he's in meetings, but his calendar was completely open yesterday morning when I checked." "Maybe he's just busy with year-end stuff," I'd suggested. "December's always crazy in the corporate world." "No, this is different, and people are acting strange. Vera from marketing barely spoke to me in the elevator, and she's usually chatty. Even Eli seemed nervous when I saw him at lunch." "Eli." I'd been wondering when that would come up. "You had lunch with Eli?" "Just a quick coffee. He wanted to update me on some department politics." She'd waved her hand dismissively. "Nothing important." Now, watching her struggle with the ice scraper, I could see the stress in every movement. Her carefully constructed plan was falling apart, and she didn't understand why. The promotion that had seemed so certain Friday night was slipping away, and she couldn't figure out what she'd done wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Jovi. "Board meeting at 9 a.m. Should be interesting." I typed back, "Keep me posted." "Will do. Coffee later?" "Absolutely." Fina came back inside, stamping snow off her boots and muttering about the weather. She'd chosen her power suit again, the navy blue one with the sharp shoulders that made her look like she meant business, but there was something desperate about the way she'd applied her makeup, like armor she was hoping would protect her from whatever was coming. I'm going to try a different approach today, she announced, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Direct confrontation. If Derron won't return my calls, I'll just show up at his office. That seems bold. Bold is what got me this far. Bold is what's going to get me that promotion. She grabbed her briefcase and keys. Sometimes you have to fight for what you want. I kissed her cheek, tasting the bitter edge of her perfume. Good luck. I don't need luck. I need results. After she left, I sat in the quiet kitchen and planned my day. The board meeting would start at 9, which meant the real fireworks would begin around 10 when they called Derron in to explain himself. By 11, the entire executive floor would be buzzing with speculation. By noon, the rumors would have filtered down to every department in the building. Perfect timing for phase 2 of my plan. I arrived at the office early again, settling in at my drafting table with coffee and the Morrison project files. But my attention was focused on the elevator bank, watching the steady stream of executives heading to the top floor. Board members I recognized from company photos, lawyers with expensive briefcases, and at 8:45, Jovi Wilder, looking like she was heading into battle. At 9:15, Patricia emerged from the elevator looking pale and shaken. She walked quickly through the architecture department, not making eye contact with anyone, and disappeared into the stairwell. Whatever was happening upstairs had rattled her badly. Ali appeared at my desk 10 minutes later, bouncing on his toes with nervous energy. "Have you heard anything?" he asked, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening. "About what?" "The board meeting. Emergency session. All the senior partners. Something big is going down." He leaned closer. "I think this might be it, Porter. The opportunity we talked about." "What makes you say that?" "Derron's been locked in his office since yesterday afternoon. Wouldn't see anyone, wouldn't take calls. That's not normal behavior for a man who's secure in his position." His eyes were bright with excitement. "Change is coming. I can feel it." I nodded thoughtfully. "Have you mentioned this to Fina?" His expression shifted slightly. "Not yet. I thought I'd wait to see how things develop. No point in getting anyone's hopes up prematurely." "Probably wise." He lingered for another minute, clearly hoping for more information, but I went back to my drawings. Eventually he drifted away, probably to spread his theories to other potential allies. Eli was the kind of person who needed to feel important, needed to believe he had inside information. It made him useful and predictable. At 10:30, my phone rang. Jovi's name on the caller ID. "How's the meeting going?" I asked quietly. "Better than expected. The board is taking this very seriously. Derron's explanations aren't going over well." Her voice carried a note of satisfaction. "They've asked him to step out while they discuss his future with the company. And let's just say his future is looking rather limited." She paused. "There's something else. They want to interview other employees who might have knowledge of his conduct. Your name came up." My stomach tightened. "In what context?" "As someone who might have observed inappropriate behavior. They know you were at the party Friday night, and they know you've worked closely with his department." Her tone was carefully neutral. "They'd like to speak with you this afternoon." "I see. Porter? This is your chance to tell your side of the story. Make sure you're prepared." The line went quiet, leaving me to consider the implications. A board interview meant official statements, recorded testimony, potential legal consequences. It also meant the opportunity to ensure that my version of events became the official record. I spent the next hour reviewing everything I knew, organizing the timeline in my mind. The expense reports, the text messages, the pattern of behavior that had led to Friday night's performance. By the time Patricia called to schedule my interview, I was ready. "Mr. Keller, the board would like to see you at 2 o'clock. Conference room A on the executive floor." "Of course. Should I bring anything specific?" "Just yourself. And Mr. Keller, this is a formal interview. You might want to consider having a representative present." "A representative?" "Legal counsel, if you feel it's necessary." I thought about that for a moment. Legal counsel would suggest I had something to hide, something to protect myself from. Better to go in clean, honest, just a concerned employee doing his civic duty. "I don't think that's necessary. I'm just planning to tell the truth." "Very well, 2 o'clock, conference room A." Word of my interview spread through the office like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that Porter Keller from architecture was being called upstairs to speak with the board. Speculation ran wild. Was I a witness, a victim, a potential replacement for someone who was about to be terminated? Fina called at 12:30, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Porter, what the hell is going on? I've been trying to see Derron all morning, and now his assistant says he's unavailable indefinitely. People are saying there's a board investigation." "I don't know much more than you do," I said honestly. But I've been asked to speak with them this afternoon. About what? I assume about Friday night. I was there, I saw what happened. Maybe they just want to get statements from everyone who was present. This is insane. It was a party game, for crying out loud. A harmless bit of fun. Her voice was rising, attracting attention from nearby cubicles. Someone's making a big deal out of nothing. Maybe. We'll see what they have to say. Porter, you need to be careful what you tell them. Don't let them twist things around. What happened Friday night was completely innocent. I'll tell them exactly what I saw. What you saw was a party game. That's all, nothing more. After she hung up, I sat back in my chair and considered her tone. Desperation was creeping in, replacing the confidence she'd shown all week. She was starting to realize that her carefully planned strategy might have backfired spectacularly. The afternoon crawled by. I tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, someone would walk by my desk, offering support or fishing for information. The entire department was buzzing with nervous energy. At 1:45, I straightened my tie, grabbed a legal pad, and headed for the elevator. The ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual, giving me time to review my strategy one final time. Tell the truth, stick to the facts, let the evidence speak for itself. Conference Room A was intimidating by design. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, oil paintings of the company's founders staring down from the walls. 5 board members were seated along one side of the table, with Jovi at the far end. She nodded politely when I entered, giving no sign that we'd spoken earlier. Mr. Keller, thank you for coming. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Richardson, gestured to a chair across from the board. Please, have a seat. Can we get you anything? Water, coffee? Water would be fine, thank you. An assistant poured water from a crystal pitcher while Richardson shuffled through a stack of papers. The silence stretched out, heavy with expectation. Mr. Keller, we're conducting a review of certain events that took place at Friday night's company party. We understand you were present for the entire evening? Yes, sir. My wife and I attended together. And you witnessed the party games that took place later in the evening? I did. Can you describe what you observed? I took a sip of water and began my account. The team-building exercises, the point system, the escalating nature of the challenges. I described Fina's strategy, her focus on winning, her calculation of the risks and benefits of each decision. When she drew the card for the bonus points, what was her reaction? She seemed excited. She'd been tracking our score all evening, and we were behind some of the other couples. This was her chance to take the lead. And her choice of partner for this bonus challenge? She went directly to Mr. Wilder's table. Didn't hesitate, didn't look around at other options. It seemed like she'd already decided what she was going to do. Richardson made notes while I talked. The other board members listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested they'd already heard other versions of this story. How would you characterize the interaction between your wife and Mr. Wilder? This was the crucial question, the one that would determine how my testimony was interpreted. I chose my words carefully. It seemed familiar, comfortable, like they'd done something similar before. I paused, letting that sink in. The crowd was expecting something playful, maybe a quick peck on the cheek. What actually happened was much more intimate. Can you elaborate? The kiss lasted approximately 10 seconds. There was obvious physical attraction, obvious chemistry. Mr. Wilder's hands were on her waist. She had her arms around his neck. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard and looking at each other like they'd forgotten there were 200 people watching. Richardson nodded grimly. What was the crowd's reaction? Mixed. Some people cheered, others looked uncomfortable. Several people were recording it on their phones. I met his eyes. It crossed a line, sir. Everyone could see that. And your reaction? I was embarrassed. For my wife, for Mr. Wilder, for the company. It was inappropriate behavior at a professional event. Did you speak with your wife about this afterward? Briefly. She characterized it as harmless fun, just part of the game. She didn't seem to understand why anyone would find it objectionable. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, covering the timeline, the other attendees, the general atmosphere of the party. I answered everything honestly, sticking to observable facts and avoiding speculation. When they asked about Derron's expense reports and travel patterns, I admitted to noticing irregularities but emphasized that I'd only recently begun to connect them to his relationship with Fina. One final question, Mr. Keller. In your opinion, did Friday night's events represent an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern of behavior? I pretended to consider this carefully, though I'd been preparing for it since the interview began. Based on what I've observed over the past several months, I believe it was part of a larger pattern. The comfort level between them, the way they interacted, the business trips and expense reports. Friday night just made public what had been going on privately for some time. Richardson closed his folder and looked at his colleagues. "Thank you, Mr. Keller. Your testimony has been very helpful. We may need to speak with you again as this investigation continues." "Of course. I'm available whenever you need me." I stood to leave, but Jovi's voice stopped me at the door. "Mr. Keller, I want you to know that the board appreciates your honesty. It takes courage to speak truth to power." "Just doing my civic duty, ma'am." The elevator ride back to my floor felt like a descent from Mount Olympus. I'd just participated in the destruction of my boss's career and possibly my wife's future with the company. The evidence I'd provided would become part of an official record that could follow them for years. But as I settled back at my drafting table, I felt nothing but satisfaction. They'd made their choices, taken their risks, played their games. Now they were facing the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Fina. "How did it go?" I typed back, "Fine, just routine questions about Friday night." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, what I saw, what I heard, nothing more." "Good. Stick to that. Don't let them make this into something it wasn't." I smiled and put the phone away. Fina was still trying to control the narrative, still believing she could manage the situation through careful spin and strategic positioning. She had no idea that the narrative was already written, that the investigation had evidence she didn't even know existed. Let her keep trying. Let her exhaust herself, fighting a battle that was already over. Because tomorrow, when the board announced their decision, the real education would begin. Wednesday morning arrived with clear skies and bitter cold, the kind of weather that made everything look sharp and unforgiving. I was drinking coffee and reading the business section when Fina's phone started ringing. She'd been up since 5, pacing around the house and checking her email every few minutes, waiting for some sign that the situation was returning to normal. The call was from Vera, her friend in marketing. I could hear both sides of the conversation from across the kitchen. "Fina, honey, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Derron's been terminated, effective immediately." The coffee mug slipped from Fina's hands, shattering on the tile floor. Coffee splashed across her robe, but she didn't seem to notice. "What? That's impossible. On what grounds?" "Violation of company policy. Misuse of corporate resources. The board met yesterday afternoon and voted unanimously." Vera's voice was sympathetic but careful. "Security escorted him out around 6 o'clock. They cleaned out his office overnight." Fina sank into a chair, her face pale. But this is insane. He built this company. He is the company." "Not anymore, sweetie. And Fina? There's something else. They're conducting a full review of his department. Anyone who worked closely with him is being investigated." "Investigated for what?" "Potential policy violations, inappropriate relationships, financial irregularities." Vera paused. "Your name came up in the board meeting." The phone slipped from Fina's fingers and clattered to the floor. She stared at it like it was a snake, then looked up at me with eyes full of panic. "Porter, this can't be happening. This is all some terrible mistake." I knelt down and started picking up the coffee mug pieces, being careful not to cut myself. "What did Vera say exactly?" "Derron's been fired. They think there was something inappropriate going on." Her voice was rising toward hysteria. "They mentioned my name. Porter. They mentioned my name in a board meeting. Calm down. Let's think about this logically." "Logically?" She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "There's nothing logical about this. It was a party game, a stupid, harmless party game, and now they're destroying people's careers over it." I finished cleaning up the broken mug and sat down across from her. "Fina, is there anything else they might have found? Anything that could be misinterpreted?" "Like what?" "Business trips, expense reports, communications that might look inappropriate to someone who didn't understand the context." Her expression shifted, and I saw the moment when real fear set in. Oh God, the conference in Atlanta, the team dinner in Boston, the planning session for the Morrison project. She was thinking out loud now, cataloging potential evidence. But those were all legitimate business activities. Were they? Of course they were. I mean, yes, Derron and I worked closely together. Yes, we had dinner meetings and strategy sessions. That's normal in a professional relationship. What about the hotel bookings, the adjoining rooms? She stared at me. How do you know about adjoining rooms? I pay attention, Fina. I notice things. Like when you come home from business trips with stories that don't quite add up. Like when your expense reports show charges for romantic restaurants and wine that cost more than my monthly salary. You've been checking my expense reports? I've been trying to understand why my wife has been so distant lately, why she's been working late so often, why she lights up whenever someone mentions Derron's name. I leaned back in my chair. The party Friday night just confirmed what I already suspected. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Porter, you have to understand. It wasn't what you think. What was it then? It was strategic, professional advancement. Derron had the power to promote me, and I did what was necessary to get his attention. Her voice was getting stronger, more defensive. That's how business works. Relationships matter. Access matters. I was playing the game the way it has to be played. By having an affair with your boss? It wasn't an affair. The words came out too quickly, too forcefully. It was networking, strategic relationship building. Yes, there was some flirtation, some chemistry, but that's normal in high-level business relationships. I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman I'd married 8 years ago. She was still there, buried under layers of ambition and rationalization, but she felt like a stranger. What about the text messages, Fina? The ones where you bragged about how easy it was to manipulate him? Her face went white. What text messages? The ones you sent to Vera, about showing team spirit to secure your promotion, about how far you were willing to go to win. How do you... Porter, have you been reading my private messages? You backed everything up to our shared cloud account. I didn't have to read them. They were right there in my phone. I pulled out my device and scrolled to the screenshots I'd saved. Would you like me to refresh your memory? She reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. Those were taken out of context. I was just venting to a friend, exaggerating to make a point. Were you exaggerating when you wrote, Porter has no idea how far I'm willing to go? Because that seems pretty specific. Tears started running down her cheeks, but they looked more like frustration than genuine remorse. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The competition for that promotion was fierce. There were 3 other candidates, all with more experience, better connections. I had to find an edge. So, you decided to seduce your way to the top? I decided to use every advantage I had. My intelligence, my work ethic, my personality, my appeal. That's not seduction, that's strategy. My phone buzzed with a text from Jovi. Can we meet? Urgent. I typed back, when and where. Coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour. I have to go, I said, standing up. I'm meeting someone about a project. Fina grabbed my arm. Porter, please. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to handle the investigation. What's to handle? You tell them the truth about your relationship with Derron, and I'll tell them the truth about what I observed. Let the chips fall where they may. The truth? Her laugh was bitter. The truth is that I worked my ass off for this company. I put in 60-hour weeks, I generated more revenue than anyone else in my department, I brought in new clients and managed existing accounts better than people with twice my experience. But none of that mattered because I'm a woman in a male-dominated industry. So yes, I used my charm and my looks and my personality to get ahead. Because that's the only way the game lets women win. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing the pain and anger and desperation behind her words. Part of me felt sorry for her, understood the impossible position she'd been put in, but a larger part of me remembered the humiliation of Friday night, the months of lies and manipulation, the casual way she'd dismissed my feelings. Maybe you're right about the game being rigged, I said, but you chose to play it anyway, and you chose to leave me out of it completely. You made me a fool in front of 200 people, Fina. You made me irrelevant in my own marriage. That was never my intention. Maybe not, but that was the result. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the phone that had brought her world crashing down. The drive to 5th Street gave me time to think about our conversation, about the mixture of truth and self-deception in her explanations. She genuinely believed she'd been playing by the rules, using the tools available to her in an unfair system. She also genuinely believed that her betrayal of our marriage was justified by her professional ambitions. Both things could be true. That didn't make either of them acceptable. The coffee shop was busy with the lunch crowd, but I spotted Jovi immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth, wearing dark sunglasses despite being indoors. When I slid into the seat across from her, I could see why. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Rough morning? I asked. You could say that. She pulled off the sunglasses and rubbed her temples. 23 years of marriage, and I'm finding out my husband is a stranger. What did the board decide? Termination with cause. No severance, no benefits, no references. They're also considering legal action to recover some of the money he misappropriated. She sipped her coffee with shaking hands. The lawyers are going through everything, expense reports, travel records, communications. They found things, Porter. Things I never suspected. What kind of things? Other women, not just Fina. a pattern going back at least 5 years, administrative assistants, junior executives, clients' daughters, always the same approach. Expensive dinners, luxury hotels, promises of career advancement. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I was so focused on Fina that I missed the bigger picture. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How many others? At least 6 that they've identified so far, maybe more. She laughed bitterly. Turns out my husband wasn't just having a midlife crisis. He was running a systematic operation to leverage his position for personal gratification. Jesus. The board is terrified of the legal exposure. Harassment lawsuits, discrimination claims, wrongful termination suits. They're talking about settling with some of the women just to avoid public trials. She met my eyes. Your wife might be offered a settlement too. What kind of settlement? Quiet resignation in exchange for a positive reference and a modest severance package. No admission of wrongdoing on either side. No public disclosure of the investigation. Jovi leaned forward. They want this to go away, Porter. All of it. I thought about Fina at home, probably calling lawyers and trying to figure out how to salvage her career. A quiet settlement might actually be the best outcome for her, a chance to start over somewhere else without the stigma of a public scandal. What about you? I asked. What happens to the company? The board is installing an interim CEO while they search for permanent leadership. I'll maintain my ownership stake, but I'm stepping back from day-to-day involvement. She smiled grimly. I need some time to figure out who I am when I'm not Mrs. Derron Wilder. And Derron himself? Moved out this morning. He's staying at some downtown hotel while his lawyers try to minimize the damage. We haven't spoken since Monday night. She put her sunglasses back on. I don't think we will. We sat in silence for a few minutes. 2 people whose marriages had imploded in the space of a week. The coffee shop buzzed with normal conversation around us. Business deals, family gossip, vacation plans. The ordinary concerns of people whose lives weren't falling apart. Porter, I need to ask you something, Jovi said finally. Did you plan this, the whole thing, from the beginning? I considered lying, maintaining the fiction that I'd just been an innocent victim who'd stumbled onto evidence of wrongdoing, but she deserved better than that. Not exactly. I suspected something was going on between Fina and Derron, but I didn't know how extensive it was. Friday night just gave me the opportunity to confirm my suspicions and act on them. So you used me. We used each other. You wanted revenge on your husband, I wanted justice for his treatment of our marriage. Our goals aligned. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. And now? Now we both get to figure out what comes next? My phone buzzed with another call from Fina. I let it go to voicemail. She's probably panicking, Jovi observed, realizing that her carefully planned career strategy has backfired spectacularly. Probably. Do you feel sorry for her? I thought about that question seriously. I feel sorry for the woman I married, the one who was ambitious and driven but still honest about her methods. I don't feel sorry for the person she became when she decided that winning was more important than integrity. That's very philosophical of you. 8 years of marriage teaches you to separate the person from their actions. I still love who Fina used to be. I just can't live with who she's become. Jovi reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think you handled this exactly right. You could have made a scene, confronted them publicly, created a huge mess. Instead, you let the system work the way it's supposed to work. The system that let your husband abuse his position for 5 years? The same system that ultimately held him accountable when presented with clear evidence of wrongdoing. She gathered her purse and stood up. Sometimes justice is slow, but it's still justice. After she left, I sat alone in the coffee shop and tried to process everything that had happened. A week ago, I'd been a married architect with a stable job and a predictable future. Now I was separated, unemployed, probably, and facing the prospect of starting over at 34. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt liberating. My phone rang again. Fina, persistent as always. This time I answered. Porter, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I was in a meeting. What's wrong? Everything's wrong. I just got off the phone with HR. They want to see me tomorrow morning for a formal interview. They're treating this like I committed some kind of crime. Did you? Of course not. I had a professional relationship with my supervisor that may have included some personal elements, but that's not a crime. That's just complicated. Fina, they have evidence. Expense reports, travel records, communications. They know this went beyond professional collaboration. What evidence? Porter, what exactly did you tell them in your interview? I told them what I observed. The pattern of behavior, the inappropriate relationship, the way Friday night's incident fit into a larger context. The silence stretched out for so long that I thought the call had dropped. "You gave them evidence against me," she said finally. "Your own wife." I gave them the truth. What you did with Derron was wrong, Fina. Wrong professionally, wrong personally, wrong morally. I'm not going to lie to protect you from the consequences of your own choices. So this is your revenge? Destroying my career because you're jealous of my success. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. You made decisions, and now you're facing the results of those decisions. That's how the world works. The world doesn't work that way for everyone, Porter. Men have affairs with their secretaries and get promoted. They use company resources for personal entertainment and get bonuses. But when a woman does the same thing, suddenly it's a moral crisis. She wasn't entirely wrong about the double standard, but she was missing the point. You're right that the system is unfair, but you chose to participate in it anyway. You chose to compromise your integrity for professional advancement, and you chose to humiliate me in the process. I took a deep breath. I can forgive a lot of things, Fina, but I can't forgive being made irrelevant in my own life. So what happens now? Now you meet with HR tomorrow and tell them your side of the story. Maybe they'll offer you a settlement, maybe they won't. Either way, you'll figure out your next steps and move forward. And us? I looked out the coffee shop window at the city street, watching people hurry past in the cold. Normal people with normal problems, going about their normal lives. I don't know, I said honestly. I need some time to think about what I want my life to look like. Porter, please, don't make any permanent decisions while you're angry. We can work through this. We can rebuild. Maybe, but not today. I hung up and walked out into the cold afternoon air. The city looked different somehow, full of possibilities I hadn't noticed before. For the first time in months, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time.